The diplomatic outpost on Kepler, 442b, gleamed under the dual suns, its Valdoran crystal facade reflecting crimson hues across the dusty mining settlement. The embassy of the Interplanetary Alliance stood as a beacon of civilization on this frontier world, a testament to humanity's reach across the stars by the late 24th century. Ambassador Luke Harrington adjusted his formal attire, a sleek navy blue suit adorned with the silver insignia of the Alliance. His reflection in the polished crystal wall revealed a young man with sharp features and calm green eyes that betrayed nothing of his past. At 32, he was among the youngest human diplomats to receive a frontier assignment. His superiors had praised his peaceful demeanor and negotiation skills, while overlooking the redacted military records buried deep in his personnel file. "The Keplerite miners will arrive in 20 minutes. Ambassador," said Elena Santos, the embassy's communications officer. Her olive skin contrasted with her platinum blonde hair, both illuminated by the holographic display she manipulated with practiced ease. "The consortium representatives are already waiting in the reception hall." Luke nodded, studying the data on resource extraction rates. "Thank you, Elena. Have the cultural exhibits been prepared for our guests?" "Yes, sir. The Valdoran crystal art pieces have been placed throughout the hall to honor our allies." Behind them, standing at attention near the doorway, Nissa observed the exchange with stoic vigilance. The Valdoran security officer's blue skin seemed to shimmer under the embassy lights, her purple hair pulled back in a tight bun that accentuated her pointed ears. Her golden eyes, characteristic of her species, scanned the room continuously, alert for any sign of danger. The Alliance had assigned her to protect Luke, a duty she performed with rigid professionalism, despite her private assessment that the human diplomat lacked the fortitude necessary for frontier diplomacy. Nissa adjusted the plasma pistol at her hip. "Ambassador, I recommend we conduct a final security sweep before the meeting begins." Luke smiled, that infuriatingly placid smile that Nissa had come to associate with human diplomats who had never seen combat. "By all means, Officer Nissa, though I doubt we'll face anything more dangerous than disagreements over mining quotas today." Nissa suppressed a frown. 6 months of guarding this soft-spoken human had convinced her he was exactly what his file suggested. A career diplomat with excellent cultural knowledge, but no stomach for the harsh realities of border worlds like Kepler 442b. He spent his days arbitrating disputes between the indigenous miners and off-world corporations, hosting cultural events, and writing meticulous reports to Alliance headquarters. All necessary work, but nothing that required the combat training Nissa maintained daily. The security officer was midway through her sweep when the first explosion rocked the embassy. The magnificent crystal windows of the main hall shattered inward, sending deadly shards flying across the diplomatic chamber. The emergency lighting flickered, bathing the room in alternating darkness and harsh red illumination. The automated security system wailed, its piercing alarm mixing with the screams of embassy staff. Luke was thrown to the floor by the blast, his formal attire now covered in crystal dust. He rolled instinctively, shielding his face from the glass raining down. Through the ringing in his ears, he could hear the distinctive whine of plasma weapons being discharged outside. Nissa appeared beside him in an instant, her plasma pistol already drawn. "Ambassador, we need to evacuate immediately. The embassy is under attack." Outside, through the gaping hole where the grand window had been, Luke could see armored figures advancing through the mining settlement, methodically firing at the embassy's outer defenses. These weren't common pirates or raiders. Their movements were too coordinated, their equipment too sophisticated. "Mercenaries," Luke muttered, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "Military-grade plasma rifles and tactical armor." Nissa's golden eyes widened slightly at his assessment. "The evacuation shuttle is prepped in the underground hangar. We need to move now." But Luke was already on his feet, brushing glass from his suit with an unexpected calmness. No evacuation. Not yet. His voice had changed, harder, more commanding than Nisa had ever heard from him. Sir, Alliance protocol clearly states— I'm aware of protocol. Officer Nissa. Luke cut her off, scanning the room with analytical precision. But we have civilians in this building, and more in the settlement who will be caught in the crossfire if these mercenaries pursue us. Our priority is to secure the embassy and establish communications. Before Nissa could protest further, Luke was moving with surprising speed toward Elena, who was struggling to restore the communications array. Elena, status report on our comms? The communications officer looked up from her console, a trickle of blood running from a cut on her forehead. They're jamming all frequencies, sir. I can't get through to Alliance Command or the defensive fleet. Professional jammers, Luke nodded. Focus on establishing a local network first. We need to coordinate within the embassy. He turned to Nissa, his diplomatic demeanor completely transformed. How many security personnel do we have on site? 3, excluding myself, Nissa replied automatically, still processing the change in Luke's bearing. Not enough, Luke muttered. We'll need to improvise. He glanced around the damaged reception hall, his gaze lingering on the heavy Valdoran crystal furniture. Nissa, help me move these tables. They're dense enough to stop plasma fire. Elena, gather everyone who can help. We're barricading the main entrance. As plasma bolts continued to impact the embassy exterior, Luke orchestrated a rapid transformation of the diplomatic hall into a defensive position. The ornate reception desk became a barricade, reinforced with crystal tables turned on their sides. The remaining security officers were positioned at strategic points, while embassy staff were instructed to gather emergency medical supplies and communication equipment. When Corin, the four-armed mining crew chief, burst into the hall with several of his workers, seeking shelter from the attack, Luke immediately incorporated them into his defensive strategy. Corin, Luke addressed the indigenous miner, whose rock-like skin was dusted with the mineral residue of his profession. Your people know the tunnel systems beneath the embassy better than anyone. Are there access points the attackers might use? Corin's multiple eyes blinked in surprise at being consulted. Yes, Ambassador. 3 maintenance tunnels connect to the embassy sublevel. My crew can help seal them. Perfect. Take 2 of your strongest workers and whatever tools you need. Reinforce those access points, but leave us an escape route if we need it. As Corin hurried away, Dr. Kell arrived, the Octavian physician's tentacles, carefully organizing medical supplies. The doctor's bulbous eyes swiveled independently, assessing the wounded staff members. Ambassador, I have stabilized the injured, but I am concerned about our medical reserves if this siege continues. Dr. Kell's voice resonated with the harmonic quality characteristic of Octavians. Luke nodded grimly. Doctor, beyond your medical supplies, do you have access to any chemicals that could be repurposed? Dr. Kell's eyes focused on Luke with new interest. I have various compounds. Yes. Antiseptics, anesthetics, some volatile reagents for emergency procedures. Good. I need you to prepare smoke compounds and, if possible, anything that could be used as an improvised explosive. We may need diversionary tactics. As the doctor moved away, Nissa approached Luke, her expression a mixture of confusion and growing respect. Ambassador, your tactical knowledge is unexpected. Luke was examining a damaged section of wall paneling, testing its structural integrity. There's a lot about me that isn't in my diplomatic file. Officer Nissa. He turned to face her fully. Before I joined the diplomatic corps, I served in Alliance Special Operations, 5 years in counterinsurgency operations across 3 systems. Nissa's golden eyes widened. That information wasn't in your security briefing. No, it wouldn't be. The Alliance prefers its diplomats to appear as non-threatening as possible. A grim smile crossed Luke's face. But right now, We need every advantage we can get. A series of explosions outside signaled an escalation in the attack. Through the shattered windows, they could see the mercenaries deploying mobile cover, advancing methodically toward the embassy entrance. They're well-equipped and well-trained, Luke observed. This isn't a random attack. Someone sent them specifically for us. Elena called out from her communication station. Ambassador, I've managed to partially decrypt their communication frequency. They're discussing elimination of witnesses and securing the evidence. Luke's expression darkened. So this isn't about ransom or political demands. It's about silencing us. He turned to Nyssa. We need to hold out long enough for Alliance reinforcements to respond to our automated distress beacon, even if we can't communicate directly. For the next hour, the embassy became a battlefield as the mercenaries launched coordinated assaults on multiple entry points. Luke revealed combat skills that astonished Nyssa, directing the defense with the precision of a veteran commander. He transformed ordinary embassy fixtures into tactical advantages, cutting power to specific sections to create darkness where the defenders knew the layout, but attackers would be blind. Rigging crystal chandeliers to collapse on advancing enemies, and using the embassy's cultural artifacts as improvised weapons. Dr. Kell's chemical mixtures became smoke bombs that obscured the mercenaries' vision, while Corin and his miners used their knowledge of structural engineering to create choke points that funneled attackers into prepared kill zones. Each time the mercenaries adapted their approach, Luke countered with a new strategy. When they deployed drones to scout the interior, Elena reprogrammed the embassy's communication array to jam their control signals. When they attempted to breach the reinforced doors with plasma cutters, Luke had already prepared a countermeasure, a surge of power from the embassy's emergency generators that overloaded their equipment. Throughout the chaos, Nyssa found herself re-evaluating her assessment of the human diplomat with every passing moment. The man who had spent 6 months discussing cultural exchange programs and resolving minor disputes between mining factions was now calmly dispatching heavily armed mercenaries with tactical brilliance she had rarely witnessed. During a brief lull in the fighting, Nyssa found Luke studying a holographic layout of the embassy and surrounding areas. Their commander is getting frustrated, Luke said without looking up. They've lost too many men trying to breach our defenses directly. They'll change tactics soon. Probably try to smoke us out or cut off life support. How can you be so certain? Nyssa asked. Luke's green eyes met hers, hard with experience. Because it's what I would do. He pointed to a section of the hologram showing the embassy's lower levels. Their next target will be the environmental control systems. We need to prepare a counterattack. A counterattack? Ambassador? We're outnumbered and outgunned. Numbers aren't everything, Nyssa. And please, call me Luke. I think we're well past diplomatic formalities at this point. Before she could respond, the embassy shook with another explosion, this one from below. The maintenance tunnels, Luke said, already moving. Exactly as I predicted. Corin! The four-armed miner appeared from a side corridor, his rock-like skin now marred with plasma burns. They've breached the lower tunnels. Ambassador, my workers are falling back. Luke nodded. Gather everyone who can fight. We're going to counter through the secondary tunnel system. He turned to Elena. Keep working on breaking through their communications jamming. If you can contact Alliance Command, tell them we've identified the attackers as mercenaries, likely employed by Voss Consolidated. Nyssa's hand tightened on her weapon. Voss? The mining conglomerate? Yes. Luke's expression was grim. I received intelligence last week that they've been conducting illegal excavations in protected indigenous areas. If they're willing to send mercenaries against an Alliance embassy, the evidence must be damning. Luke assembled a strike team consisting of himself, Nyssa, Corin, and 2 embassy security officers. They descended into the tunnel system, a labyrinth of mining shafts that predated the embassy's construction. The air was thick with mineral dust and the distant echoes of plasma fire. "Corin, lead us through the maintenance bypass," Luke instructed. "We need to circle behind their advance team." As they navigated the narrow tunnels, Nyssa stayed close to Luke. "Your background explains your combat skills, but not your knowledge of these tunnels," she said quietly. Luke smiled faintly. "First rule of diplomacy: know your environment better than anyone else. I've spent many nights studying these tunnel systems instead of sleeping." They emerged into a larger chamber that housed auxiliary power systems, just in time to encounter a squad of mercenaries setting explosive charges. The ensuing firefight was brief but intense. Luke moved with the fluid precision of a trained operative, using minimal movements to maximum effect. He didn't waste ammunition, each shot finding its target with deadly accuracy. Nyssa fought alongside him, her own combat training complementing his style. Together, they neutralized the mercenaries before they could detonate their explosives. "They were trying to cut off our secondary power supply," Luke said, examining the charges they had placed. "Professional work." Corin approached, his multiple limbs carrying salvaged weapons from the fallen mercenaries. "Ambassador, these tunnel supports won't withstand much more plasma fire. If they bring down the ceiling, they'll bury us all," Luke finished, "which means we need to take the fight to them." He activated his communicator. "Elena, status report." "I've managed to isolate their command frequency." Elena's voice came through with static. "Their leader is someone called Captain Ray. He's ordered his remaining forces to converge on the main processing facility." "The refinery," Corin exclaimed. "That's where all the control systems for the mining operation are housed. If they secure that, they control everything from life support to defense systems," Luke concluded. "We need to move now." The group made their way through increasingly unstable tunnels, the rumble of distant explosions sending cascades of dust from the ceiling. Twice, they encountered mercenary patrols, and each time, Luke's tactical guidance ensured they emerged victorious with minimal injuries. As they approached the refinery's lower access point, Luke halted the group. "This is where it gets complicated. The refinery is their primary objective, which means it will be heavily defended. We need a distraction." He turned to Corin. "Your knowledge of the processing systems is crucial here. Is there a way to disrupt the refinery operations remotely?" Corin's rocky features creased in concentration. "The primary coolant systems have an emergency override. If triggered, it would create a facility-wide alert, possibly drawing some of their forces away from the central control room." "Perfect," Luke nodded. "Nyssa, you and I will approach from the maintenance shaft while Corin triggers the coolant alert. Our objective is to secure the control room and prevent them from accessing the facility systems." As they finalized their plan, Elena's voice came through their communicators again. "Ambassador, I've decoded more of their transmissions. They're not just here to eliminate witnesses. They're planning to destroy the entire settlement. There's evidence in the facility servers that would implicate Voss in illegal mining operations that cause toxic contamination of indigenous lands." Luke's expression hardened. "So they're willing to commit genocide to cover their tracks. All the more reason to stop them here." The refinery was a massive underground complex, with towering metal structures processing the valuable minerals extracted from Kepler 442b's crust. Steam hissed from overworked pipes, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of industrial chemicals and superheated metal. When Corin triggered the coolant system alert, klaxons blared throughout the facility. As predicted, several mercenaries rushed to investigate, allowing Luke and Nyssa to slip closer to the central control room. They were almost at their objective when they encountered Captain Ray himself, a hulking figure augmented with cybernetic enhancements. His right arm had been replaced with a mechanical limb that ended in an integrated plasma weapon, and a targeting system gleamed where his left eye should have been. Well. Ray's voice was amplified by a vocoder embedded in his throat. "The Diplomat himself. Coming to play soldier. Director Voss said you might be more trouble than you appeared. Luke pushed Nyssa behind a metal conduit as Ray fired a burst of plasma that melted the flooring where they had stood moments before. You know this won't end well for you, Ray, Luke called out, assessing their surroundings for tactical advantages. The Alliance doesn't take attacks on its embassies lightly. Ray laughed, the sound distorted by his cybernetic enhancements. There won't be enough evidence left to prove who was responsible. Once we're done, this entire settlement will be nothing but a mining accident gone tragically wrong. Luke caught Nyssa's eye and made a series of subtle hand gestures, military signs she recognized from her own training. She nodded, understanding his plan without words. When Luke emerged from cover, he didn't fire immediately. Instead, he stepped into the open, drawing Ray's attention fully to him. Your employer made a critical mistake, Luke said calmly. He assumed that because I'm a diplomat, I wouldn't know how to fight. Ray aimed his integrated weapon. Last mistake you'll ever point out. As the mercenary commander fired, Luke moved with startling speed, diving and rolling beneath the plasma burst. In the same fluid motion, he drew and fired his own weapon, not at Ray, but at a pressurized coolant pipe above the mercenary's position. Superheated steam erupted from the ruptured pipe, temporarily blinding Ray. In that moment of distraction, Nyssa emerged from her position and fired a precision shot that damaged the mercenary's cybernetic arm. Ray roared in pain and fury, his targeting systems attempting to compensate. But Luke was already inside his guard, executing a combat maneuver that used the mercenary's enhanced weight against him. With precision, born of years of special operations training, Luke struck key pressure points that temporarily disabled Ray's cybernetic systems. The mercenary commander crashed to the floor, his mechanical enhancements sputtering and malfunctioning. How? Ray gasped, his organic eye wide with disbelief. 5 years. Special Operations Tactical Division, Luke said, securing the mercenaries' weapons. Before I decided that preventing conflicts was better than fighting them. He glanced at Nyssa. Most of the time, anyway. With Ray neutralized, they proceeded to the control room, where they found evidence far worse than anticipated. The Voss consolidated servers contained detailed plans, not just for covering up illegal mining, but for the systematic exploitation of Kepler 442b that would render large portions of the planet uninhabitable for its indigenous population. They're not just planning to destroy the settlement, Luke said grimly, reviewing the data. They're going to use the refinery's processing furnace to trigger a chain reaction that will contaminate the entire region. It's industrial sabotage disguised as an accident. Nyssa's golden eyes narrowed. Can we shut it down? Not remotely. They've already initiated the sequence from a subsidiary control node. Luke studied the facility schematics. We need to reach the main processing furnace and manually override the system. Just then, Corin burst into the control room, his rocky skin scorched from nearby explosions. Ambassador, more mercenaries have entered the facility. They're sealing all exits. Luke's mind raced through options, calculating risks and probabilities with military precision. There's only one way to ensure they can't complete their plan. He pointed to a section of the schematics. We need to overload the processing furnace ourselves, but in a controlled manner that directs the explosion away from the settlement. That would destroy the entire facility, Corin said, his multiple eyes blinking rapidly. And everything in it, Luke nodded grimly, including us. If we don't time our escape perfectly. Nyssa stared at him. You're suggesting a suicide mission. I'm suggesting we do whatever it takes to save innocent lives. Luke held her gaze steadily. I took an oath as a diplomat to protect the peace. Sometimes that means making difficult choices. Before they could debate further, Elena's voice came through their communicators. Ambassador, I've broken through the jamming. Alliance Command responds that reinforcements are en route. ETA 40 minutes. Too long. Luke shook his head. The chain reaction will be irreversible in 20. He made his decision. Elena, I need you to do something crucial. The evidence of Voss's plans is in the system. Broadcast it on all frequencies. Local settlement channels. Alliance emergency bands. Even commercial networks. Make sure everyone knows what they were planning. Understood, sir. Luke turned to Corin. I need your expertise to help me reconfigure the furnace controls. We can't stop the overload, but we can redirect it. To Nissa, he said, you should lead the embassy staff to safety through the Eastern Tunnel system. It's the furthest from the projected blast radius. Nissa's expression hardened. With respect, Ambassador, I was assigned to protect you. I'm not leaving. That's an order, Officer Nissa. Then I'm disobeying it. Her golden eyes flashed with determination. My duty is to ensure your safety, and I can't do that if I'm not with you. For a moment, Luke looked as though he might argue further. Then a slight smile crossed his face. Very well, let's move. We have less than 20 minutes. The journey to the main processing furnace was a gauntlet of hazards, both from the mercenaries desperately trying to complete their mission and from the increasingly unstable facility itself. Systems were already failing, causing explosive decompressions in some sections and dangerous chemical leaks in others. Luke led them through the chaos with unwavering focus. His diplomat's knowledge of the facility's layout, combining with his military training to find the safest route. When they encountered resistance, he neutralized threats with efficient precision, never taking a life unless absolutely necessary. The processing furnace was a towering inferno of molten metal and superheated gas, contained within a massive chamber at the heart of the refinery. Control panels surrounding it were already flashing with warning indicators as the sabotage program pushed the system toward catastrophic failure. Corin, I need you to access the primary cooling controls, Luke instructed, already working at the main terminal. We need to create a pressure differential that will direct the blast upward through the ventilation shafts rather than outward toward the settlement. As they worked frantically to redirect the inevitable explosion, Nissa maintained a defensive position, her plasma pistol ready. They had almost completed the necessary modifications when a final wave of mercenaries breached the chamber, the last of Ray's forces, determined to ensure no witnesses survived. Keep working, Nissa shouted, engaging the attackers with precise fire. I'll hold them off. The firefight was intense, plasma bolts scorching the metal walls as Nissa fought with everything she had. Luke continued his work, fingers flying across the controls, but he kept glancing back at Nissa's position, clearly concerned, as she was gradually forced to give ground against superior numbers. When a plasma bolt grazed Nissa's shoulder, sending her stumbling backward, Luke made a split-second decision. He locked in the current configuration, not optimal, but sufficient, and joined the fight. What followed was a display of combat prowess that would have stunned anyone who knew Luke only as a diplomat. He moved with lethal grace, each action economical and devastating. Within moments, he had neutralized 3 mercenaries and created an opening for Nissa to recover her position. The cooling reconfiguration is complete, Luke said, returning to the controls as Nissa covered him. Now, we need to trigger the overload and get out of here. We'll have approximately 5 minutes once the sequence begins. A deep rumble shook the facility, metal groaning under immense pressure. Warning klaxons blared at deafening volume as the furnace temperature indicators climbed into critical ranges. It's now or never, Luke said, his finger hovering over the final command sequence. Nissa met his eyes and nodded. Do it. Luke activated the overload, immediately. The chamber was bathed in red emergency lighting as the facility's automated systems recognized the impending catastrophe. Run! Luke grabbed Nissa's hand, and together with Corin, they sprinted for the emergency exit shaft, their one hope of escaping before the explosion. The journey out was a nightmare of collapsing tunnels, erupting steam pipes, and the constant fear that they wouldn't make it in time. Twice they had to backtrack when passages collapsed ahead of them. Once, Corin's knowledge of the facility saved them when he identified a maintenance shaft that bypassed a section of tunnel already consumed by fire. As they neared the surface, the rumbling intensified. The ground beneath their feet shuddered violently, and the air grew thick with toxic smoke and dust. "We're not going to make it," Corin gasped, his multiple limbs straining as he helped support Nissa, whose shoulder wound was slowing her down. "Yes, we are," Luke said with absolute conviction. He pointed ahead to a faint light, the exit shaft leading to the surface. Just a little further. They emerged into the crimson daylight of Kepler 442b, just as the ground began to give way beneath them. Luke pulled Nissa behind a massive boulder, shielding her body with his own, as Corin pressed himself against the rock face. The explosion, when it came, was both more and less than they had feared. Their modifications had worked. The blast vented primarily upward, a towering pillar of fire and debris that rose into the sky rather than expanding outward. The settlement, while damaged, would survive. But the refinery itself was obliterated, along with all evidence of Voss Consolidated's operations, save for what Elena had managed to broadcast before the explosion. As the dust settled, Luke helped Nissa to her feet. She winced at the pain in her shoulder, but managed a smile. "You never were just a diplomat, were you?" she asked softly. Luke looked out over the devastation, his expression a complex mixture of regret and determination. "I'm both, Nissa. A diplomat who understands that sometimes words aren't enough, and a soldier who learned that violence should always be the last resort, not the first." In the distance, they could see Alliance shuttles descending through the atmosphere, the reinforcements, arriving too late to prevent the destruction, but in time to provide aid to the survivors and secure what remained of the embassy. "What happens now?" Corin asked, his rocky features etched with concern for his people. "Now," Luke said, straightening his dust-covered diplomatic attire with a gesture that seemed both incongruous and perfectly in character. "We rebuild, and we ensure that Voss Consolidated is held accountable for what they've done here." 3 months later, the newly reconstructed Alliance Embassy on Kepler 442b hosted a ceremony unlike any the settlement had seen before. The Grand Hall, now rebuilt with enhanced security measures integrated seamlessly into its elegant design, was filled with representatives from across the sector, including indigenous leaders and Alliance officials. Luke stood at the center of the gathering, his diplomatic uniform adorned with a new insignia, that of a senior ambassador of the Alliance, a promotion granted in recognition of his actions during what was now referred to as the Kepler incident. "Today, we celebrate not just the rebuilding of this embassy," Luke addressed the assembled crowd, "but the strengthening of bonds between the Alliance and the people of Kepler 442b. What Voss Consolidated sought to destroy through violence, we have rebuilt through cooperation and mutual respect." He gestured to where Corin stood among his people, the miner now officially recognized as the indigenous representative to the Alliance. "The new mining accords ensure that resources are extracted responsibly, with fair compensation and environmental protections enforced by joint oversight committees." As Luke continued his speech, Nissa watched from her position near him, no longer just a security officer, but now officially designated as his special security advisor, a role created specifically to acknowledge her contributions and the unique partnership they had formed. The evidence Elena had broadcast had been enough to trigger a sector-wide investigation into Voss Consolidated. Director Voss himself was now facing charges of conspiracy, attempted genocide, and crimes against sentient beings. The corporation had been forced to divest its holdings on Kepler 442b and pay substantial reparations to the indigenous population. When the formal ceremony concluded, Luke found a moment to speak privately with Nissa in the embassy's cultural wing, a space now dedicated to preserving and celebrating both indigenous Keplerite art and contributions from Alliance worlds. "You could have returned to Valdora when they offered you a promotion," Luke said, admiring a new crystal sculpture that commemorated their defense of the embassy. "Command of your own security detail would have been prestigious." Nissa's golden eyes met his. "I have discovered that my place is here, Ambassador. There is much I can still learn from you." "About diplomacy?" Luke asked with a slight smile. "About balance," she replied. "You taught me that strength and compassion are not opposing forces, but complementary ones. That true protection sometimes requires both the warrior's resolve and the diplomat's wisdom." Luke stepped closer to her, their professional formality softening in the privacy of the moment. "And you taught me that I don't have to choose between the soldier I was and the diplomat I've become, that both aspects of myself have value." Their relationship had evolved beyond professional boundaries during the Reconstruction period. What had begun as mutual respect forged in combat had deepened into something more profound, a connection that bridged their different species and backgrounds. "The Alliance has requested my presence at the Centauri system," Luke said after a moment. "There are reports of corporate exploitation similar to what we faced here. They want someone with experience in both diplomatic negotiation and crisis management." "When do we leave?" Nissa asked without hesitation. Luke's smile widened. "I was hoping you'd say that." Later that evening, as the dual suns of Kepler 442b set below the horizon, Luke and Nissa stood on the embassy's observation deck, looking out over the recovering settlement. The refinery had been replaced with a more sustainable processing facility, jointly operated by Alliance engineers and indigenous workers. New safety measures and environmental protections were evident in every aspect of its design. "Do you ever regret it?" Nissa asked suddenly. "Choosing diplomacy after your military service?" Luke considered the question, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "No. Even with all that happened here, I believe diplomacy saves more lives than combat ever could. But I've learned that sometimes, to protect peace, you need to remember how to fight." He turned to her, reaching out to trace the outline of her face with gentle fingers. "And you? Do you regret staying with a diplomat who sometimes finds himself in the middle of firefights?" Nissa leaned into his touch, her golden eyes reflecting the starlight. "I was assigned to protect a diplomat. I chose to stay with a warrior who believes in peace. There's a difference." Their lips met as the final light of day faded, human and Valdoran embracing under the alien stars, two individuals who had discovered that their differences made them stronger together than they ever could be apart. As they prepared to depart for the Centauri system the following day, both knew that whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them as they had faced the mercenaries of Voss Consolidated, with the diplomat's wisdom and the warrior's resolve, united in purpose and in heart. The Alliance transport ship awaited them in the early morning, its sleek hull gleaming in the light of Kepler 442b's rising suns. Embassy staff and indigenous representatives gathered to bid them farewell, including Corin, whose multiple arms were laden with ceremonial gifts, and Elena, whose communication skills had proven invaluable during the crisis. "The Centauri system is not ready for what's coming their way," Elena said with a grin as she embraced Luke. "A diplomat who fights and a bodyguard who negotiates? We prefer complementary skill sets," Luke replied with a smile. As they boarded the transport, Nissa took one last look at the rebuilt embassy, a symbol of resilience and cooperation that she had once viewed merely as an assignment, but now recognized as the place where her understanding of duty had transformed forever. Luke joined her at the viewport as the ship lifted off, his hand finding hers in a gesture that crossed species and cultures. "Ready for our next mission, Special Advisor?" he asked. Nissa's golden eyes met his green ones, filled with confidence and trust that had been earned through fire and sacrifice. "Always, Ambassador, always." The transport accelerated into the upper atmosphere, leaving Kepler 442b behind as they journeyed toward new challenges. Their unique partnership, forged in combat and tempered by diplomacy, ready to face whatever the stars might bring.